There are people out in the world that are going to fall in love with my art and they're going to want to buy more than one piece. It doesn't take a ton of people. You just have to find the right people.
Well, hey there, my passion maker, you. This is Miriam Schulman, your curator of inspiration. I'm so grateful that you're here. Today's guest is a contemporary wildlife painter who has found abundant inspiration through her years of guiding wildlife tours in Yellowstone National Park. Her works have been shown in venues such as the National Museum of Wildlife Art and the National Buffalo Museum and have been collected around the world. Please welcome to the Inspiration Place, Elizabeth Mordensky. Hey, Elizabeth, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Well, I'm so excited you're here. So why don't you take everyone back to, let me cycle back in time. When did you decide to become an artist?
Well, I think it was kind of slow in coming. I always loved art, even as a little kid, but as many people didn't necessarily believe that that is a possible career, that you can, do art for not just for the fun of it, but as a career. So I made a stab at it several times where I would, do a flurry of work and try and market myself without any idea of what I was doing and just go for it and fail miserably each time, or, felt like I was failing miserably each time, maybe making $1,000 or $2,000 in a year. So definitely not a sustainable business. And yeah, I've just finally decided I needed to completely go all in. And that's when I started listening to podcasts and ended up finding your podcast online.
Okay. So Elizabeth was a very successful student of the Artist Incubator program. And what really impressed me about Elizabeth is she would come to the calls and you could really see your determination, like how committed you were. And I remember telling you from the beginning, well, to me, it was like, well, obviously you need to do press for your artwork and look and because it's the wildlife connection. And you listened to me. I was like, well, nobody listened. My kids never listened to me. I'm so happy that I have these artist clients who listen to me. So tell me about your experience. And do you agree that that made the biggest difference for you was going all in on publicity? Or do you think it was something else?
It has been a factor, and I certainly still trying to master that.
Okay, we'll go over the other factors in a moment, but let's start there with the factor number one, publicity. So tell everybody about what you did and what the results were.
So I've gotten publicity in a couple of ways. So obviously the desired hope is free publicity. So I have been successful in a few instances when I have partnered with bigger organizations. So for example, when I had my paintings in the National Buffalo Museum, which they are still on display there, and they actually purchased one of them for their permanent collection.
That's fantastic.
So super excited for that.
Yeah.
But so I was able to get some publicity just through the newspapers around there. I was not successful in getting any in my local town, but I still was able to get both online and in physical newspapers in the area of the museum. And then also the same thing when I partnered with the Wyoming Wildlife Advocates as well for a charity show. I was able to get some press for that. And then I have done some paid publicity as well,
which we call advertising.
We called advertising, yes. And I remember distinctly talking to you about this. And, I was like, is it worth it? Is this something that I should or should not look into? And you basically just said, be extremely strategic about it. Make sure that in the publications that I'm looking at, that people that are being successful in my area are also showing up in these places. So I paid attention to that, paid attention to the fact that they were showing up multiple times in these magazines. So I chose to go with Western Art Collector as this paid advertising. And I didn't just go for it when they were like, oh yeah, you can pay for an ad and do a quarter page or a half page. I made sure they worked into the deal that I was going to be also in some of their editorial pieces. So fantastic. I paid for 3 ads and I got into 4 editorial pieces. So I think that was definitely a huge win. And I know I got some traffic from those editorial pieces. I sold one of the paintings right after the magazine came out. And I don't think I had any other connection to this person at all. So
can you share those numbers? Like how much was that piece that you sold after the magazine?
Yeah, so I actually sold 3 pieces to that collector, and it totaled about $9,600 total.
Fantastic.
So
Yeah.
it was a big sale. I
Way
mean,
more
one of the
than your
pieces that was in the
investment.
magazine was
Yeah.
absolutely, yes, way more than the investment. So I think that paid advertising is something that you should never do lightly. You just need to make sure that you're really researching what you're getting into, and is it going to be put in front of the right eyes, the collectors that you're targeting.
Right. Not other painters.
Exactly. Yes, not
Eh,
just other painters.
which, of course, painters do buy art too. But you want,
Absolutely.
right. But you wanted the primary audience to be collectors. So I want to back up a moment because you mentioned the National Buffalo Museum, who collected a piece of your art. How did that opportunity come about? Was that a juried opportunity? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so this is actually what I would say was even more influential in how I've been doing with my art, but just putting myself out there and asking for things.
Yes.
So I remember being incredibly inspired by a couple of your other students, including Dawn and Kira, but mostly Dawn in this instance, where she was always just like, okay, well, Miriam said I should ask for something. And so I'm contacting all these places and asking. And so that's what I did. That's what I did with the Wyoming Wildlife Advocates. And that's what I did with the National Buffalo Museum. I said, hey, I would like to create a herd of bison, and I would like to hang them in your museum. And they said, well, we don't have space for that, but we can give you 3 prime spots. And so I painted a life-size bison and then 2 slightly smaller than life-size bison. And they are hanging where there's a lot of traffic in that museum. So and it all came about by me just emailing them and saying, hey, I see one of your exhibitions is coming to a close. I would like to be your next one.
Okay, so that's factor number 2 is be willing to let people say no to you. So here's what people don't always understand is that they look on social media and they see everybody's yeses. There's like 10 no's for every yes. We just don't go on social media and brag about it. When you don't keep that in mind, that you have to be willing to hear no in order to get those yeses.
Absolutely. And I have definitely heard no's. I've heard no's from publicity opportunities. I've heard no's from galleries. So I've heard lots of no's, but the yeses have been big. So I'll take the yeses.
Okay. All right. So we went over factor number 1 was publicity. Factor number 2 is being willing to hear no. What would be the third biggest change for you?
Maybe just being more confident about putting myself out there, not even just in the way of publicity, but being willing to stand up for my art and say, you know, this is what it's valued at. This is what I can put my prices at, and not be scared to do that. So I'm talking about on social media, I'm talking about my email list, just on my website, just talking to people in person. But yeah, just being okay with the fact that I'm a professional artist and that my work is valuable. It really comes to that mindset piece of, not hiding behind what you think people want and don't want, and what they're willing to pay for it. So I'm just a lot more confident. And I think that's come from seeing other artists in the program, listening to you talk, and then also just working on the mindset side of things.
Okay, so now I want to talk about email marketing. Is that something that you did always, or was that a change for you when you joined the incubator?
Email marketing was a change for me, and I'm still getting better, and I am seeing, some results from that for sure. So
That's wonderful. I'm so glad to hear it. Okay, I want to hear about your collaboration with Wild Excellence Films that you were telling me about. You're providing a film for the Golden Eagle Conservation. Tell us about that.
yeah, I'm providing some art for the film that they're creating, and I'm also going to be providing a painting for them to have as a silent auction at the film debut in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. So it's a really exciting project. I think this really comes from, I mentioned at the beginning of the episode how I had tried several times to start my art career, and I've always kind of floundered and not really gotten to where I wanted to be. And part of that was, at that point, I was just creating art for art's sake, which for many people, that's fine. And that is truly their passion. But for me, I really needed it to be connected to my other passion, which is the wildlife conservation and public lands conservation. That is a huge part of my life. And being in the outdoors is a huge part of my life. And so it was really when I connected creating art and then also having that cause behind of it, sometimes very upfront in your face and sometimes just in the underlying theme of the art. But that was really another pivotal point in my career, was connecting those two passions. And so the Wild Excellent film, people actually got in contact with me because I had worked with Wyoming Wildlife Advocates, the nonprofit that's located out of Jackson Hole. And so it was that connection that I had reached out to a charity I was passionate about, and then they had passed my name on to this other group that was doing this film. And so I'm really excited. I'm going to be doing some drawings and paintings for them to use inside the film, for them to explain like the nesting habits of the birds and some other things as well. And then I'm also creating that big piece to be auctioned off at the opening. So it's just an amazing opportunity and something that is aligned completely with my goal as an artist and a person. And also it gets my name out there in a big way, and especially in a community of people that are passionate about both what I love and art. So Jackson Hole is definitely a big art community as well. So
one thing that I want the listeners to know that Elizabeth shared with me before we hit record, that I think is true for a lot of artists, is you actually don't need a lot of collectors to make your business work. Elizabeth, could you share with me what we were just talking about?
Yeah, definitely. I was just talking to Miriam and saying how I was getting a little bit nervous, I guess, because a lot of my success this year has come through one big client who has been a repeat buyer for me. And, on the one hand, I started thinking, oh, well, a business isn't necessarily sustainable through one client or a couple of clients. But on the flip side, I started thinking, well, if there is a client out there that is willing to pay, if there's a client out there who's willing to collect my art over and over and over again, then there's more clients out there like that. It's not just one. I just have to find them. So not only can I right now say, all right, this is going really well for me, but it makes me realize that there are people out in the world that are going to fall in love with my art and they're going to want to buy more than one piece. And I have seen that a few times, but it doesn't take a lot. It doesn't take a ton of people. You just have to find the right people.
Yeah. So a lot of my artist colleagues, they'll say the same thing. It's like, well, it's a good thing Mary showed up to the show, but that's like what it is. And if you go into museums and you look at collection of, you look at the painting and you look underneath, you'll see the same names over and over again for like Matisse.
Absolutely.
There was that Russian textile, I don't remember his name. It was Russian textile magnate, whatever it's called. What did they call oligarch? Whatever they call rich people in Russia. So, he collected all these Matisses. And then there was also, he depended on the Coen sisters. So he had these very few high-end high net worth individuals who avidly collected his art. It wasn't like there were thousands of people out there buying Matisses, but he didn't need that. He only needed a few people who were very enthusiastic about their art. And as we said on the show before, art collectors are kind of like cockroaches, where there's one, there's more than one.
Yeah, absolutely. They're around. You just have to find them.
Well, Elizabeth, I am so proud of everything you accomplished. You worked very hard and very smartly, and you are to be commended on all the work that you did. If people want to find you, you can find Elizabeth on Instagram, Elizabeth Mordensky Fine Art. You can also find a link to that or her website in the show notes. All righty, Elizabeth, do you have any last words?
I think one of the most amazing things is that I was working 5 to 7 days a week on my other job for the last 6 months. And I've still by far had my most successful year I've ever had. I've already passed my income goal, not my stretch goal yet, but my regular income goal, just by implementing as much as I could in the time that I had while I was working 60 hours a week on another job. So just listen to everything Miriam says, because if you just implement a little bit of it, like email marketing a little bit, or trying to go after press a little bit, you're going to be making strides. And I'm so excited now that I'm going into being a full-time artist here in Portland. Every small step you take, every little thing you do, that's going to get you closer to your dream. So don't feel like you have to have everything planned out and ready to go before you start. Just, take actions, every little action you can when you have the time, and you will start seeing results.
I love that. All right. Thank you for being with me here today. And I'll see you the same time, same place next week. Stay inspired.